Hey guys, welcome to the fourth part of What If Tanjiro Could Use Hamon. Last time we left off after the conclusion of the Entertainment District arc and the Demon Slayer's victory over Upper Moon 6. With everyone caught up, let's begin. After returning to the Demon Slayer headquarters, Tanjiro would rest for the next few weeks to fully recover from his wounds and fatigue following the intense battle, using Hamon to accelerate his recovery. While resting, Tanjiro would have a dream, seeing a man sitting in a house as another individual, Sumiyoshi, brings him tea and some food. The man thanks his friend for the hospitality, in which the latter apologizes for his wife being asleep and his child having to be babysat by a guest. He tells him not to worry about the situation and that he shouldn't continue receiving meals for free from his friend. Sumiyoshi denies this, revealing that his family was saved by him and their lives were thanks to him. He also offers to pass down his guest's tale as he didn't have any successors, even if his family were just simple coal burners. Sumiyoshi is gently turned down by his friend, as he states that his heritage will find its way back itself and that no matter what, it will return. He then says that, despite Sumiyoshi viewing him as powerful, he was unable to protect what was important to him and had little worth. Tanjiro internally begs the man to not think of himself like that and cries as he wakes up from the dream, heavily bandaged and hooked up to multiple force. He tries to figure out where he is and is suddenly interrupted by a falling vase. Kaneo stands in shock at the doorway and reveals that Tanjiro had been unconscious for 3 weeks, tearfully stating that she's glad he's awake. Now at 100%, Tanjiro would refine his Hamon techniques, attempting to mimic his father, meditating on a spike upside down with only one finger supporting him, while waiting for his friends to wake up. After they had woken up, Tanjiro would notice that his sword were chipped during his fight with Upper Moon 6. Finding multiple letters containing death threats and angry scrawlings of hate which clearly depict that there will be no new sword forged for him, from Hotaru Higanzuka, his swordsmith. Now distraught, Kyo tries to uplift Tanjiro by saying that Hotaru is being the difficult one, and he should try to meet him at the swordsmith to discuss in person. Tanjiro would eagerly request permission to visit the village, which Hibayashiki allows, sending a Kakushi to take him, who informs him that in order to keep the village safely hidden, Tanjiro must be carried there and will need to put on a blindfold, earplugs, and nose plugs. Throughout the journey, Tanjiro is frequently passed on to a new Kakushi, while the crows are also swapped in an effort to maintain the location's secrecy. Once Tanjiro arrives at the village, he is amazed by the sense of the hot springs and loudly shares his gratitude towards the Kakushi for transporting him, which echoes loudly throughout the hot springs, eventually being heard by the love hashira, Mitsuri Kanroji, who is bathing in a nearby spring. Tanjiro then introduces himself to the village chief, who explains that Hotaru Higanzuka has gone missing, however they will find him, recommending Tanjiro relaxes in the hot springs in the meantime. While advancing to the springs, Tanjiro runs into Mitsuri Kanroji, who had just returned from bathing, complaining to Tanjiro about a man who didn't introduce himself to her. However, she is calmed down by Tanjiro revealing that the dinner for guests is almost done, which Mitsuri excitedly scurries off to. At the springs, Tanjiro is surprised to encounter Genya Shinazugawa, excitedly jumping into the water and tries to converse with his fellow Demon Slayer, but is saddened after Genya angrily strikes him and storms off. Back at the village, while eating, Tanjiro and Mitsuri talk about food, family, and Genya. While walking through a corridor, the hashira bids farewell to Tanjiro and praises him for his hard work, expressing her approval for the siblings. After Tanjiro declares that he will be sure to defeat Muzan, Mitsuri happily hints about a secret weapon hidden in the village that could make him stronger, bidding him farewell. The next day, Tanjiro searches through the forest looking for Hotaru and ponders about the secret weapon Mitsuri told him about. In the distance, he suddenly sees 2 individuals, one of them being the mist hashira, Muagio Tokito. Behind the trees in the forest, Tanjiro worriedly watches a young child yell at the mist hashira, proclaiming that he wouldn't hand over his key and his knowledge to him. Muagio suddenly strikes and grips the boy, much to Tanjiro's horror as he races over to restrain Muagio's wrist in an attempt to force him to let go. Despite having a smaller and thinner body composition than Tanjiro, Muagio hardly budges and asks for Tanjiro to release his hold, quickly punching him in the stomach and calling him weak. The hashira senses a demon in Tanjiro's box, but he slaps his hand away and saves the boy in the process. When the boy continues denying Muagio the key, he insults him and other swordsmiths, stating they had no worth besides making swords and this conversation was currently wasting him time that could be used to save people. Angry at Muagio's degrading words, Tanjiro hits him and expresses how he was too cruel to the child. While he states that he does not deny the accuracy of his words, Tanjiro stresses the importance of swordsmiths and how they, too, are fighting along with the demon slayers. Albeit not on the front lines. Muagio cuts him off and hits him in the neck, knocking him out cold. Right before losing consciousness, Tanjiro notices Hotaru Higanzuka behind a tree. While unconscious, Tanjiro hears a conversation between the child and Hotaru, but the latter runs off as soon as Tanjiro begins to regain consciousness. After picking himself up, Tanjiro excitedly inquires whether Hotaru was just there, which the boy nervously denies. The boy also reveals that he gave the key to Muagio, in which Tanjiro apologizes for intervening as it wasn't his place to. He is thanked, however, for standing up to the hashira in order to defend a complete stranger. The two converse, and the boy informs Tanjiro about the key's use, which is to operate a deteriorating mechanical doll that had been built by his ancestors and was used for swordsmen to train. In the middle of their conversation, the two suddenly hear loud sounds. The boy then leads Tanjiro over to where Muagio is intensely training with the battle doll, dubbed Yoritichi Type 0. While watching Muagio Tokito train against the mechanical doll, Tanjiro looks at the doll's face and ponders the idea that he has seen it before. He asks the young boy why the doll had 6 arms, in which he is told that as it was modeled after a real swordsman, the doll's 6 arms were necessary to imitate his movements. Tanjiro tries to push for more information, but the boy apologizes and states he didn't know much else, besides that it originated in the Sengoku period. Surprised, Tanjiro notes how that must mean Yoritichi Type 0 is over 300 years old, and even so, it still hadn't been destroyed. The boy replies that his ancestors were able to construct the doll at a level that couldn't be accomplished again at the present time, hence its durability, and he wouldn't be able to fix it himself. Especially without the aid of his late father, given that he doesn't possess the knowledge or skills to do so. Hearing this, Tanjiro understands the reasoning behind his resolve to not hand over the key to someone that could potentially break the doll. The two observe Muagio for a while longer, and Tanjiro admires the hashira's uncanny degree of skill, despite being of similar age. Muagio's Kasugai Crows chips in and loudly praises her master's abilities, referring to him as a descendant of the sun-breathing users and a genius completely different from Tanjiro. Amazed at his bloodline heritage, Tanjiro curiously inquires why Muagio wasn't able to use the sun-breathing, which receives him an angry assault by the crow. While he is being attacked by her, Tanjiro suddenly remembers the dream he had and how the swordsman he saw had a face that matched that of the dolls. Hearing his words, the crow stops and grumpily questions the logic behind his words, given how the swordsman was from so long ago. The young boy pitches in, proposing that perhaps it was a memory that was passed on, providing the example of a swordsmith inheriting memories of their swords and skills from ancestors. Suggesting it may be similar to what Tanjiro was experiencing. The crow thinks of this idea as nonsense but is cut off as Tanjiro introduces himself to the boy, and the boy introduces himself as Kotetsu. Suddenly, the group hears a sound and witness Muagio destroying parts of the doll, with pieces of its armor flying away. Devastated at the sight, Kotetsu runs away and hides in a tree, crying over the broken doll. Tanjiro finds him and attempts to motivate him by saying he'll eventually be able to improve and fix it, in which Kotetsu replies that he is too pathetic to do so. Tanjiro climbs up the tree and flicks Kotetsu as a method of snapping him back into reality. Exclaiming how he had to make the effort and develop the skill so that even if he wasn't able to fix Yoritichi Type 0, the generations after him would. Tanjiro compares his struggle with Kotetsu's, affirming that even if he dies before he is able to accomplish his goals, someone else will eventually be able to do so in his place so long as the framework is set. Cheered up, Kotetsu and Tanjiro conclude to determinedly work hard together. While they chat during a walk through the forest, they encounter Muagio again, who expresses that the training was helpful. However, his sword broke, so he will be taking one of the doll's swords. He tosses the broken sword indifferently to Tanjiro, asking him to discard it. Although confused by the swordsman's attitude, Tanjiro notes he lacked a malicious aura and likely wasn't acting rudely on purpose. A storm brews overhead as Tanjiro rushes to Kotetsu, who appears aloof while staring at the broken doll in the rain. Tanjiro suggests they check if it can still move, which is met by approval from the boy. As they pick it up, it remains stagnant for a few moments before suddenly shifting into a stance, much to Tanjiro's excitement. Kotetsu then fiercely orders him to train with the doll and become stronger than Muagio with his aid, surprising him. Tanjiro brutally trains with it without food, water, or sleep under Kotetsu's direction, because the latter does not understand the limits of a human. Just as Tanjiro approaches the brink of death, analogous to nearly crossing the Sanzu River, he becomes capable of smelling the incoming movement of the doll and lands a hit on it, earning him his first meal. After gaining this ability to predict movements, Tanjiro continues to train it and improves his stamina and foresight. In the middle of a spar with the doll, Tanjiro's newly improved abilities grant him an opening to behead it. However, he hesitates mid-swing and worries about breaking the doll. Kotetsu yells at him to strike, reassuring him that he would be able to fix it. Internally, the young boy begs Tanjiro to not waver so that one day, he will become stronger than anyone else. With Kotetsu's approval obtained, Tanjiro succeeds in landing a blow to the doll's neck and breaks his training sword in the process. He apologizes to Kotetsu for the ruined sword and, after Kotetsu's sudden exclamation, Tanjiro turns to see a sword's hilt emerging from the doll's body where its head used to be. Their surprise quickly shifts to fascination and excitement as the pair attempts to deduce the age of the blade. Kotetsu urges Tanjiro to take the sword, but Tanjiro is adamant on the fact that he could not and that the doll breaking to make it appear wasn't completely his doing. Kotetsu insists that as the owner of the doll, he has the final say and that Tanjiro should take it, especially considering how he needed a new blade anyways. Caving in, Tanjiro pulls out the blade as Kotetsu watches excitedly in anticipation, but they are crestfallen after seeing the blade had rusted with its age. Kotetsu tries to apologize to a tearful Tanjiro for getting his hopes up, but they are suddenly interrupted by a muscular Hotaru Higanzuka emerging from the woods. Hotaru mentions that he heard their conversation and tries to take the sword from Tanjiro and Kotetsu, who resist. They try to get Hotaru to explain his motive, but the swordsmith continues to try to take the sword and finally forces it out of their hands. Kazuo Kanamori appears behind Hotaru and tickles his sides, making him fall limp. Kazuo greets Tanjiro and Kotetsu and goes on to explain Hotaru's situation. He states that Hotaru had been remotely training in order to improve his forging skills so he could make a strong sword for Tanjiro, in which the Demon Slayer happily admires Hotaru's thoughtfulness. Kazuo continues on, saying how Tanjiro's repeated requests for swords from Hotaru made him happy, as he lost many of his clients with his personality. Amidst their continuous chatter, Hotaru suddenly regains consciousness and confidently declares that he will fix the rusted blade. Kotetsu fusses over how he could have just easily explained before they fought over the sword, which results in an angered Hotaru lifting Kotetsu by the neck. The next day, Tanjiro talks about Hotaru's progress on the sword with Genya Shinazugawa, who, angered by Tanjiro's presence and attempts at friendliness, tries to get him to leave. When he starts yelling, Tanjiro notices that the tooth he had pulled out a few days ago had reappeared. He questions him on this and shows the tooth he had picked up as proof, disgusting Genya and resulting in him being kicked out of the room. Saddened, Tanjiro ponders his fellow Demon Slayer's consistent anger. Later that night, a swordsmith strolls through the village after a bath and encounters a pot on the ground. Curious, he reaches for it but is suddenly engulfed by the pot, killing him. Gyoko, the upper rank 5, emerges and comments on the poor quality of the swordsmith as a meal. Elsewhere, upper rank 4 Hantengu cowers on a roof and states they must quickly accomplish their mission. An asleep Tanjiro Kamado is woken by Muagio Tokito pinching his nose. The mist Hashira questions Tanjiro if he knew Kazuo Kanamori's whereabouts, as he was his new swordsmith. Tanjiro mentions that he was likely with Hotaru Higanzuka and offers to help find them. Muagio asks why Tanjiro would willingly accompany him when he had other things to be doing, and Tanjiro replies he believes helping others would positively benefit him. At Tanjiro's words, Muagio feels a strong sense of familiarity and questions him on what he had just said. The Demon Slayer tries to reply, but is hit by an awakened Nezuko, breaking Muagio's perception. Seeing Nezuko, Muagio comments on her uniqueness and wonders where he'd seen her before while Tanjiro worries about Shichamaru, Teimeo's feline assistant, appearing before them. The trio keep thinking about their respective worries, and Tanjiro and Muagio sense a presence behind the doors. When they glance over, Hantengu crawls into the room without radiating his presence as a demon. Tanjiro and Muagio both realize Hantengu is an upper rank and prepare to attack, with Muagio immediately using mist breathing, 4th form, shifting flow slash. Hantengu swiftly dodges to the ceiling and cries, begging the Demon Slayers not to hurt him. Tanjiro tells himself not to hesitate and uses Hotaru's newly forged blade to attack Hantengu with Hinakami Kagura, Sunflower Thrust. Hantengu dodges again, but receives a blow from Nezuko in her awakened form. Tanjiro tells Nezuko not to transform, and meanwhile, Muagio successfully beheads Hantengu. Tanjiro remembers that beheading an upper rank does not necessarily result in its death based on his prior fight with Daki and Gyutaro, and yells at Muagio to keep his focus. Right as he does so, the severed head and body transforms into two new demons, one of which holds a leaf-shaped fan. Muagio attacks the demon with the fan, while Tanjiro takes on the other. As Muagio rushes to attack, the demon waves his fan at him and intensely blasts Muagio out of the building. Tanjiro and Nezuko manage to hold onto the rubble and come face to face with the two demons. Karaku, the demon with the fan, asks his partner Sekido if he was having fun. Sekido responds negatively and uses his staff to emit bolts of lightning-like attacks, which slowly make Tanjiro lose consciousness. Before he does, he sees Genya Shinazugawa on the rooftop pointing a gun at Sekido. Genya Shinazugawa shoots both Sekido and Karaku with his Nishirin gun, blasting off Sekido's head and nearly decapitating Karaku. Karaku expresses enjoyment towards the fight as Genya rushes in to slash off his head with a Nishirin sword. Tanjiro yells at Genya that his attacks were futile and the demons were willingly being beheaded so they could keep splitting and increase their attack power. As the battle continues, Tanjiro desperately analyzes his opponents and tries to pinpoint their weaknesses, but his thoughts are interrupted by a third, bird-like demon, Urojai, who lifts him up into the air with his foot. Realizing that each demon has a unique ability, Tanjiro instructs Nezuko to assist Genya, but, horrified, he realizes that his teammate had been impaled by a fourth demon, Azetsu. Urojai taunts him for worrying about others and not himself, proceeding to generate a sonic scream. Tanjiro attempts to counter with Hinekami Kagura and successfully cuts off Urojai's leg, spreading Hamon throughout the limb. However, the demon cuts the infected area off to prevent further spread. Tanjiro is unable to dodge the scream and is violently struck with the attack as he falls. Tanjiro plummets through the trees, using life magnetism to create an impromptu hang glider. Gently landing on the ground, he pleads himself move and protect the village. But his injuries render him incapable of moving at 100%. Azetsu lands near him and holds his leg down as he directs another shriek, and Tanjiro silently watches in alarm. Elsewhere, Muagio dashes through the forest as he makes his way back to the village. He spots Kotetsu trying to hold off a minion fish demon and internally decides that he is not of priority to save. Considering the boy's lack of refined swordsmanship skills and the importance of the village chief. However, as he hears Kotetsu's cries as the demon grabs him, Muagio remembers Tanjiro's words of how helping others would positively benefit himself. He slashes the fish demon's arm, releasing Kotetsu, and stuns guard over the boy while requesting for him to run so he wouldn't be in the way. Science: nothing has changed about Muagio, his fight is the same as canon, so there is no point covering it. In the forest near the edge of the village, Tanjiro dodges an attack from Urojai by slicing his head, splitting him into two more demons. However, the sunlight yellow overdrive slash spreads Hamon throughout the demon, disintegrating the clones. Tanjiro Kamado continues fighting against Urojai and considers using the demon's flight ability to exit the forest and return to Nezuko Kamado and Genya Shinazugawa in the village. Finalizing his plan, Tanjiro stabs the demon in the mouth when he picks him up and uses the force to smash into the building's exterior wall, cracking it and falling in. Tanjiro then infuses Hamon into the attack, disintegrating the clone permanently. Tanjiro picks himself up in time to see Sekido paralyzing Nezuko. When he dashes to save her, Sekido generates another staff and tries to hit Tanjiro, but the boy uses bubble barrier to create a massive bubble, absorbing the attack to defend himself and prevent the lightning from reaching him. He then uses a sunlight yellow overdrive flame dance to slice the demon's head and tongue, disintegrating the clone, allowing him to pull the staff out of Nezuko's neck. He looks up in time to see Karaku soar through the air and hit the building's floor with enough pressure to bore a hole through it and render Tanjiro and Nezuko unconscious. Meanwhile, a crow caws through the night as Mitsuri Kanroji runs through the forest. She tells herself to hurry and enthusiastically states the convenience of the swordsmith village being close to where she was stationed. As soon as she arrives, Mitsuri protects the swordsmiths, killing a giant fish demon. Tanjiro Kamado suddenly wakes up and looks to see Nezuko Kamado carrying him through the building as she dodges gusts of wind from Karaku. However, the pressure from Karaku's fan attack makes the building collapse, with Nezuko getting caught under the debris. Unable to move, she grasps on Tanjiro's blade, making herself bleed while Tanjiro begs her to let go and that he will find a way to move the rubble. She refuses to stop holding the blade and uses her blood demon art to set it on fire. Tanjiro notices the blade burning from the heat, and is shocked to see it change color from black to red as it gets enveloped in flames. At that moment, Tanjiro gets an inherited memory. Seeing an unnamed man and woman comment on how a swordsman with earrings had a blade that was normally jet black but somehow turned red when he was in combat. Tanjiro links the swordsman's blade with his, noticing the similarities in their color changes and how his was thanks to Nezuko Kamado's blood demon art. He pushes himself to ignore his body's fatigue and injuries and tells himself to meet the expectations of those who had helped him thus far. Karaku belittles Tanjiro and rushes towards him to attack, but he sees the red sword and Muzan Kibuzuyu's memories trigger. Karaku recognized the red sword as the one used by the demon slayer that nearly killed their master and, as Tanjiro swings his sword back, his motions greatly resemble those of the swordsman. While stunned, the demon is slashed with the Sunlight Yellow Overdrive Hinakami Kagura, Dragon Sun Halo Head Dance. After decapitating them, Tanjiro recognizes the fiery sensation when cutting down the three demons as the same one he felt when he dealt the final blow to Gyutaro at the entertainment district. He goes to look for Hantengu's last form, Azetsu, and sees him impaled to a tree with his own spear as Genya Shinazugawa stands in front of him, holding the demon's head. Tanjiro's relief over Genya's safety and the defeat of Azetsu quickly switches to horror as Genya turns to reveal a demonified face. His thoughts are interrupted by a yelling Karaku, who complains about his inability to regenerate and the burning sensation in his wounds, as he disintegrates. Tanjiro feels uncertain if defeating the four emotion demons is the correct way to finish off the upper rank, and, at that moment, he smells a fifth body. He tries to think of how to find it but Genya grabs him, declaring that he will be the one to defeat the upper rank and become a hashira, not Tanjiro. Realizing that Genya has not succumbed to demon instincts, Tanjiro and Nezuko give full support of his goal much to Genya's surprise. Their conversation ends with Tanjiro splitting up with Genya and Nezuko to rush off and find the fifth body so Genya can be the one to behead him. He rushes around and desperately searches. Finally spotting the body cowering and quivering behind the bushes as it quietly mutters encouragement to himself and that the emotion demons would defeat the slayers. With his mark now activated, Tanjiro easily destroys the final clone, giving Genya directions to the main body, by tracking its scent. After continuous searching, Genya spots Hantengu behind the bushes shrunk down. He shoots him with his gun, but the demon dodges and runs away. While pursuing him, Genya inwardly chastises the demon's wimpy nature and swings at his neck with his Nishirin sword. He pushes himself to force the blade through Hantengu's neck, but the sword suddenly snaps due to the demon's thick neck. He tries shooting again with his gun again to no avail. All of a sudden a clone consisting of only a hand and a mouth, appears behind Genya and attempts to crush Genya's head with its talons. Distressed, Genya remarks that he can't regenerate his head and is about to die. Before he gets struck, he thinks of his elder brother, Sanemi Shinazugawa, and states how he wanted to become a hashira so he could apologize to him for cursing at him after he protected him by killing their demonified mother. Luckily, Tanjiro appeared, punching the demon hand with a scarlet overdrive, igniting the clone, killing it. Then wrapping the hilt of his sword with his haori, imbuing the blade with Hamon, tossing it to Genya. Yelling for him to not give up, reminding him that he was supposed to be reaching for the goal of hashira and that he should only think about beheading Hantengu. Rain-inspired, Genya accepts Tanjiro's sword, dashing over to Hantengu and hitting him with the flaming sword. Upon being struck, Hantengu lets out a piercing scream. Breaking the skin, Genya puts pressure on his blade and attempts to force it through Hantengu's neck. The demon continues his high-pitched screeching, but Genya refuses to waver, opting to ignore it. He keeps trying to behead Hantengu but his sword loses its power from Tanjiro. And due to Genya not releasing any Hamon of his own, it doesn't continue to spread, allowing Hantengu to regenerate. Suddenly, Genya, Tanjiro, and Nezuko are attacked by a tree that is being controlled by Hantengu and has his real body in it. But they can't cut it when their arms are occupied holding onto the tree. Genya has no choice but to eat the tree. It is then revealed that Genya cannot use breaths and has the special ability to temporarily inherit the traits of the demon if he eats its flesh. The top part of the tree falls to the ground after Genya eats a lower part of the plant, cutting through the trunk of the tree. Now with his hands freed and able to breathe and produce Hamon, Tanjiro easily cuts the tree up. Nezuko then sets the whole tree and Tanjiro's sword on fire with her blood and Tanjiro uses Dance of the Fire God. Flame walls to cut the tree in half to reach the hollow inside where Hantengu's real body is, but he's already gone. Hantengu's real body has shrunken to a miniature size and is running away on the forest floor. Tanjiro screams at Hantengu that he will make the demon pay for every sin he has committed. Hantengu remembers someone saying that everything he does is his responsibility, but he says he hasn't done anything wrong in his entire life. Then Genya throws a tree at him. Despite ripping out numerous trees, each one fails to accurately hit Hantengu. Nezuko then emerges and attempts to quickly swipe at Hantengu, but he evades her and quickly speeds off. Thinking of what to do, Tanjiro recalls a conversation he had with Zenitsu regarding total concentration. He circulates air throughout the fibers in his muscles and the blood in his veins and is able to quickly blast towards Hantengu in an instant. As Tanjiro tries to behead him, Hantengu rhetorically asks him if Tanjiro feels bad for him and then suddenly grows in size and chokes Tanjiro, preventing him from using Hamon while Genya and Nezuko rush in and try to help Tanjiro. Genya tries to pull Tanjiro free while Nezuko leaps into the air and uses her blood demon art. Genya manages to rip Hantengu's arms off but panics about getting burned as he ate demon flesh. However, with the help of his friends, Tanjiro manages to behead the demon, spreading Hamon through its body. At the same time, the sun begins to rise, so Tanjiro yells for Nezuko to hide in the shade, but his voice doesn't reach her, causing Nezuko to run his way in worry. He yells at Nezuko to go hide in the shade, but then notices that Hantengu's decapitated body is still moving and attacking the villagers. There is resentment written on the tongue of the body's head, where there should be the word fear, meaning that the body that Tanjiro decapitated was not the real one. Before Tanjiro can take any action to find the real body, the rays of light from the rising sun reach Nezuko. She starts to burn. Tanjiro shields her with his body and tells her to shrink smaller, but she is still getting burned. All the others are too far away to help him, and Hantengu's body will get the villagers before he can put Nezuko in the box and save them. Nezuko kicks him in the direction of the villagers and smiles at him as she sacrifices herself for the villagers' sake. Tanjiro cries as he decides that he needs to find the real body, running in the direction of the fake body. He starts by sniffing out the real body, finding that it's in the fake body's heart. The fake body has caught the villagers, but Tanjiro cuts its arm off before it can hurt them. Memories from Hantengu's previous human life flash before his eyes just before Tanjiro slices his head off. Tanjiro collapses on the ground in sadness and exhaustion. He won, but he sacrificed his sister to do it. But the villagers shake him and point in the direction behind him. Standing in the sun, healed and uninjured, is Nezuko. Tanjiro stares in disbelief as Nezuko says morning for the first time in years. Tanjiro shakes and cries tears of happiness as he asks Nezuko if she has become human again, but her only response is echoing his words. Tanjiro realizes that even though she is standing in the sun, she still has fangs and the eyes of a demon. Tanjiro is in disbelief that she is fine and hugs Nezuko and cries. Nezuko pats his head and smiles. Genya watches the display and smiles too. Tanjiro soon passes out due to exhaustion, and in the distance Mitsuri screams, loses strength just as the body of Hantengu she was fighting disintegrates to dust. In another place, a maid and Musen's mother walk in on Musen, disguised as a child, cackling in glee before brutally obliterating the head of his mother. The maid stares at Musen in horror as he talks about how there is no more need for the blue spider lily when all he needs to do is find Nezuko and devour her. Then he can conquer the sun. As he reverts to his adult form, Musen mercilessly murders the maid while she tries to run away from him. Musen had wanted the perfect immortal body, and now that Nezuko had conquered the sun, all the battles will be centered around her. And they will be even bloodier than before. Muigyo thanks Tanjiro for helping him get something important back, and the arc ends with a happy reunion hug initiated by Mitsuri with Nezuko, Tanjiro, Muigyo, Genya, and Kotetsu. Okay guys, this is the end of the fourth part of What If Tanjiro Could Use Hamon. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like and commenting what you enjoyed about this video and subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload, as chances are, if you liked this video, you will probably like my other ones. With that out the way, this is Demonic Saiyan saying bye.